All right, great. Thanks, everybody. Looks like we'll be a little more intimate, which is not terrible. Public speaking cannot be difficult. I just want to say, right now we're addressing residential on-street parking permitting. I think anyone could leverage this workflow for any sort of review and approval process. So I think that's where the power in this came from. And that's why I submitted it. So I'm Dave Ullman. I'm a GISP. I'm the Senior GIS Analyst for the town of Chapel Hill. And just some program details about our parking. It's an annual parking cycle, right, for the permitting. It's on the fiscal year cycle, so it breaks right there, June, July. It's mostly students. There are some permanent residents. And it's in defined residential parking zones, mostly around our downtown area, because you get a lot of bleed over, and then, people going downtown park, then the residents can't park. There are over 6,000 eligible addresses for this program. Usually we get around 1,200 to 1,500 applications. So we don't get all of those, but a lot of those are coming from the same house, right? We don't allow student stuffers, but there are some pretty crowded houses in some of these locations. The Parking Services Division does have a third-party software solution, and you can see it supports the license plate scanning, which makes it easy for enforcement, ticketing, maintenance, billing, all those things. And there's only 3 office folks. The 2 records technicians, for the most part, deal with the review and approval workflow. The division manager steps in every now and then, but usually it's just the 2 techs that are dealing with that review and approval. So here's a look at the application cycle. These are weekly data points. So these are the volume of applications per week. The red line is the average. So it's only about 13 applications per week throughout the year. You can see it's pretty low volume for most of the time, but then once you get to that fiscal year cycle turnover, that's when it really gets competitive, and you can see the volume jumps way up. I don't know how I can see the numbers. This is the highest at 110 right here, and that's in 1 week for those two folks to review. So there are some limitations to the current system, and that's kind of where we stepped in, but the limitations right now is their electronic permitting system doesn't receive applications or the supporting documents like license, registration, proof of residence. It doesn't support their application review at all. Doesn't do any, there's no communication module, right? No constituent engagement. And they've been receiving paper applications, which really prohibits the batch data entry into the management system and the license plate scanning system. And so the practical effects of those limitations, you can see parking services, they're just overworked during that time. And they have to spend a lot of resources shuffling paper, going through all the electronic records. And that is personally identifiable information, right? So it's something that really needs to be secure. And it could be more secure if it was in our relational database system. And so the result of that is that there's a latency period, right? So when someone submits an application, it has to go through the review, then the data entry, and then the electronic permit issuance. During those peak times, that can take up to 10 days, right? And so that makes enforcement really difficult because our policy is not to ticket people with an active application. And so essentially, there's really no way for the field enforcement staff, which I think there's only 2, but there's no way for them to check and see if, hey, does this vehicle have an application without calling the office, paper shuffle, check my email, try to find those applications, right? And then there's the manual communication. You have students calling, did you get my application? Is my application ready? How long is it going to take? All these things are cutting into the time they need to process those applications. So it's just a real bottleneck. So even though they have the scanning system and a modern system for that, it's really the application process that we're focusing on. So they requested solution. This was the parking services manager. He needed some help. They needed this multifaceted process to do all those things that I just listed they can't do. They need to receive the electronic applications, the attachments like the license, registration, proof of residence, and they wanted to automate those communications. They don't want to be on the phone. They want to be processing those applications. So they really want to get the program information out there to reduce questions, and then also automate the communications for the actual decision itself. And they need a temporary permit so their field staff can immediately see whether or not a vehicle has an application in, so they know not to ticket unnecessarily. And then they also wanted a way to improve the batch data entry, right? So instead of entering those data, those records one at a time into their management system, they wanted a way to do it wholesale at their preferred interval, whether it's weekly, biweekly, whatever. And you can see they didn't want any maps. They didn't care. They don't need to see it. So that was kind of an interesting thing. That's one of the first things we offer. Hey, what do you need to see? What's the visualization? And there just wasn't one for this project. If you're interested, this is the QR. You can scan that. If you want to check out our form to see how it works, I would just say that it does have autocomplete, so you can't get past the address bit unless you enter an eligible address. So you just start entering numbers, some addresses will pop up, and you can kind of see what's going on. But we designed the application with Survey123. I should say the application form with Survey123, which is pretty much the go-to these days for web forms. For all those reasons, the form logic, conditional form fields, calculate expressions, the report generation was really important, creating those Survey123 reports. And you can have one feature service that you initially publish or that's already published. And then you can build multiple forms off of that. So you can have application form and the review form looking at the same data. And so that was really why I wanted to leverage Survey123. Just some notable design elements. For the addresses, we have a curated address list. So instead of letting people do free-form text entry, and let's see if we can geocode that, we have a curated address list that's in a CSV format that's published with the survey. And what's nice about that is you can set it as linked content, so then it lives in ArcGIS Online. So if they need to update eligible addresses, zones, whatever's in that table, I don't have to do it. They don't call GIS. They can go straight to their content in their group, download it, update it, and re-upload it, and it's updated. And then we're doing that with the pull data function. So from that information we're pulling from the form, then we can auto-calculate other fields that are reliant on that information. Then during that May-June, where the cycle's about to turn over for the fiscal year, we do accept applications for both cycles, for May and June. So in the form, we're actually having to do a little bit of logic to say, okay, what's the month? Which fiscal year is that in? And then we're giving the messaging in the form saying, if you're applying for this current cycle, it's only going to be good till July. Here's your prorated rate. If you're applying for the next cycle, it's not going to be good until July. Here's your full price. And so by giving them as much information in the application as we can, I think we're really eliminating a lot of that back and forth, phone calls, engagement, et cetera. And I'm sure you guys have already read the rest. But based on the zone and the user type, again, we're auto-calculating as much as we can in terms of how many permits are allowed in the zone, if there's a guest cost, if there's a limit to guest permits. People see it as soon as they make their selection, so they can know if they're making the right selection. And they just don't have to come to us and ask. And we're doing a lot of that with nested if statements. I don't want to get too much into that, but it's just really useful when you're trying to work through several conditional logical expressions where a standard if statement, you'll have your condition statement. What do you do if it's true? What do you do if it's false? With the nested if statement, it's the same, but that second false argument, you're putting another if statement. And then you kind of keep going, and you can have many if statements, and it can get confusing after a while, but once you get it right, it's pretty powerful stuff. And then the vehicle information registration are in a repeat section, so those are actually stored in a related table. But we're instantiating the repeat section with their permit selection. They're saying, I have one vehicle, I have two vehicles. Then they don't have to go through that little repeat section, if you're familiar, and create a repeat record, right? It's created for them for whatever they've selected. I know you can't really see that, but this is the form. It's only about 62 rows. It's really not that difficult in terms of getting this done. It's not a lot of work just to build this form, right? So then we get to their review application, right? We've got this great new form. It's logical. It's smart enough to do what we're trying to do. And so they needed a way to review the applications. And for that, we used Experience Builder and Survey123 again. And this time we're using the review form as opposed to the application form. But the requirements, they wanted a single interface. They had to be able to search the records, right? They've been shuffling paper too long. They needed to be able to search these. And we're exposing the applicant, the vehicle data, fields that are specific to the review, right? So they're published with the initial form, obviously hidden in the application form. But so we're exposing those on the back end in the review part. They want to be able to look at and review the supporting documentation in the review user interface. And they need to inform the applicant of their decision, right? So they wanted something, as soon as I hit approved, tell the applicant it's been approved, right? It sounds simple, and it kind of is. We'll get there. And so with that decision, if they're approved, they wanted that temporary permit issues, right? That's important to get our enforcement back on track. And then if denied, again, we're trying to eliminate these communications, give them the comment that the staff puts in their review form saying, this is why you were denied. So we're really trying to, we all want to be engaged with our constituency as needed, right? As needed. So we're trying to eliminate that need. So the solution here is just this pretty simple Experience Builder app. There's one side panel list widget, where you can search address, name, driver's license, 2 details widgets. If you're familiar with Experience Builder, these are just what the widgets are called. And the details widgets have the application supporting documentation as attachments, right there for viewing and review. And then the form, use the embed widget to embed the Survey 123 form. And you're using URL parameters, right? So you have the URL of your survey, then you're adding the parameter to put it into edit mode so they can actually make changes to the data. And then you're passing the global ID of the record that's selected in the list widget to the form. So you're opening that existing record. And we're going to go live. We're breaking rules. So this is the app. And so what I'm going to do is search my name. You can get results right away. Select that. Let's pick this one. So then I can collapse this. And this is their review interface. On the left, they have applicant information. It's all pretty standard. Here's my attachments. I can open those and check them out. Here's my vehicle information, which is coming from the related table. And then the registration for each vehicle. Then you have your review form, which is a little redundant with the vehicle information. But as you scroll down, that's where you get those review-specific fields, right? So if I denied this right now, I would immediately get an email saying, your permit's been denied. Here's your decision document as a PDF attachment. And that's it. It's pretty simple. It's, they're non-GIS users. They didn't want anything real tech-heavy, so it's just a web app. All they have to do is toggle a couple fields, and their job's done. And so once they get through this will sort of take us back a little with applicant engagement because we're on the front end and the back end of the review process. But we're using Power Automate, Office 365, webhooks to automate both the messaging about the program, for eliminating that communication, and the decision and permit delivery, right? So you've been approved, you've been denied, here's your temporary permit. So when a new application is submitted, Survey 123, the connector in Power Automate triggers a flow, and it sends a confirmation email immediately saying, we've got your application, here's some information about our program, right? So don't ask these questions, don't call us. It's gonna take 7 to 10 days, don't call us, right? And then we give them the global ID as a number. That was just kind of the easiest thing to do instead of trying to calculate unique values for confirmation numbers. And so it's just a form email. It's pretty simple. So then when the staff reviews a form and they submit that Survey 123 form in the Experience Builder app, it triggers another flow. And this one has some branching logic depending on what was approved, what was denied. That's just the form asking if it can update. And so there's multiple possible permutations for permits, right? They're allowed up to 2 vehicles. It could be 0 to 2. They're allowed up to 2 guest permits, so 0 to 2. So any combination there, your flow has to kind of deal with that logic and the numbers there. So first thing we check, if anything's still pending, which is the default value that we calculate in the application form, immediately staff gets an email saying, hey, review is incomplete, right? And if there's nothing pending, they get a permit decision with an attached PDF document explaining their decision. If approved, it'll also have their temporary permit. And so this is the bit, this is the decision flow. I'm going to go over this in Power Automate, the interface. I kind of just want to get the text in for posterity, so if anyone wanted to use this as a resource going forward, they'd have it written down. The one thing I will say is if you are going to use Survey123 and Power Automate to create a review form, you set that up in Power Automate, right? So that creates the webhook. Then you have to go to Survey123 to the website, in the process in red, and you have to toggle edit existing records so your flow fires when that existing record is edited instead of on a new record entry. And I'll go through all this. You guys can read through it as I'll scroll slowly. But essentially it's this, right? So the first step here, this is Power Automate. If you're not familiar, it's pretty simple. It can be simple anyway. But when the survey response is submitted, that Survey123 connector will start this flow. That's the trigger. And then you have to have an array variable for your permit status, right? Because I have up to 4 permits, right? 2 vehicles, 2 guests. So I could have up to 4 different values going in there. So it has to be an array for your variable. And because there's a repeats record, I'm going to take those vehicle permit statuses from that repeats related table, iterate them, and get that approved, denied, whatever the status may be. And so then I check the guest records, right? We're checking the guest records for any value. So because not everyone's going to ask for a guest permit. So if it has approved, denied, pending, that's a value. That tells me there's a guest permit. I need to get that value. I'm then going to pin that into that same permit status array variable. Clicked one too many. Right, and then so the next step is once you have all your vehicle and guest permit statuses in your array variable, you have to use this compose connector because that'll give you an output. The array is just an array, it doesn't give you an output. So you use this compose, pass the permit status array to that, and then it gives you this output here. If it contains pending, any value of pending, that's when you send the email to staff, right? And for my email, I just have the name, the address, the confirmation ID, which is a global ID. And then to make it super easy, I put a link here to the review form, right? So they can just click the review. I'm passing the global ID of that record. So in their email, it says, hey, you need to review this. They can just click that, and it takes them straight to the form that they need to review, right? To make it really easy for them, ideally. So if there's no value of pending, that's when we create our report, our permit. So again, you get that create report trigger will start. You have to upload, this is OneDrive. This little symbol here means OneDrive. But so you have to upload a file to OneDrive before you can do it as an attachment to your email, right? So it uploads to OneDrive. Then you got to get the file path and then pass it back to the next step, right? So then I'm sending the email to the applicant. This is dynamically populated by their address. Unless you want UTC time, you got to format that date and time. I'm sending from do not reply, so I don't get a bunch of replies. And then I'm giving the name of that document and then the body of the document. That's the actual data, right? And then you can reply to parking services at Town of Chapel Hill to get more information on your permit. And this is kind of what it looks like, right? This is the first page of what they would receive. You have vehicle 1, vehicle 2. All this is dynamic, and I'll show how it's kind of put into this table later. But this is the format. It's nice and clean. It's got all their information up top there, all dynamically entered. And this is their temporary permit, right? So it's clearly expires March 22nd. It's written right there. Enforcement can scan this with a mobile device and directly go to that record. It tells you what the license plates are for, the state. So we try to put as much information as we can to make enforcement really, really rapid, basically. And so that's kind of how we did that permit flow. There are some pretty significant limitations. The main one is that the token expires every 2 to 3 weeks. So in the flow, after 3 weeks, instead of seeing the name of your survey at the top, you're going to see the item ID. That means the token's expired and you have to reconnect it. It does not take long. You just go to the website, open up your flow, go to the connections section, and switch the connection to the same ArcGIS Online account. It literally takes about 5 minutes. I just have a notification Outlook every 2 weeks says update this permit flow. I don't think you can schedule it as a scheduled task in Windows yet. As far as I know, that's what that is. It's basically an issue between Esri and Microsoft. Last I heard, they're working on it to sort it out. It's not sorted yet. And obviously for this, you would need a subscription to Office 365 or some other webhook provider. So if we get into the report template itself, this is a Survey 123 report template. And that's basically just a formatted Word document. It's pretty simple. Effectively, it's a form letter, except you just have the field references for the Survey 123, or for the feature service fields. And so then in the form, in this document, we can have dynamic and conditional content like messaging, tables, the table sections, the QR image, any of the URL content, and then the dates. And so this is what that template looks like, right? So you can see anywhere there's that $ and the curly braces, those are my field references. This table, I'm actually calling the repeats position, like position 1, position 2. That's how I can get the thing to say vehicle 1, vehicle 2. And then everything else is just inserted conditionally if there's something data there for that particular permit. And then even in the messaging, you can have conditional sections, right? So if it's denied, show them this. If there's a guest permit, show them some of these things. There's conditional stuff kind of peppered all through this little bit here. And then the QR code is on that second page. And really all that is I'm calling this URL, api.qrserver.com. I'm passing the survey URL as a URL parameter. And then with that, I also has a URL parameter for the global ID and the mode. So it's view mode, here's the global ID, and then that's all written to that QR code by the QR service. And lastly, the last bit is the records processing, the batch data entry that they asked for. Like I said, it's usually manual, but their system can consume Excel, which is super easy, right? It's just a table for us. So when they submit their review, the Survey 123 connector triggers another flow. It iterates over those vehicle records in the related table and check to see if there are approvals. If there are approvals, then the vehicle information is written to a spreadsheet on OneDrive. It's a 2-sheet workbook. And then the applicant information is written to the other sheet, right? And then they're related by the global ID. So initially in the form, we have a global ID. I write that to the repeat section as a parent global ID in the related table. So I'm maintaining that connection. It makes it a lot easier to query instead of trying to query related records. And then they just, this is what that looks like in Microsoft Power Automate. It's just a couple connectors, the Survey 123 connector. Is there an approval? If yes, add a row to this table on OneDrive. If yes, add a row to this other table on OneDrive. So it's pretty simple to get it to do that. And then they just download it, they enter it, they blow out the table so it's empty again, and start over. And that's pretty much it. It's a lot of steps put together. None of them are super complex, but together it's a system. So it's pretty cool. And it made their jobs a lot easier. And that's all for me, unless anybody has any questions. Yeah, so the question is whether we can incorporate payment processing. Survey 123 does not do that. Esri does not do that. We had looked into, using like a Payflow Pro kind of a URL in that confirmation email, so they could then essentially click and then go to the PayPal website. That was kind of nixed over time. I think our business management office wasn't comfortable with that process. So right now, payments are a separate process. What else? All right. Well,
Any other questions?
Great, thanks. Thanks for showing up, y'all.
Congratulations again.
Yeah, thanks.